Hello everyone, I am the Enforcer, and today I'm coming with you to talk about the day 45 news of the past 24 hours in Ukraine. I have to say this, I used to say this a lot at the beginning of these streams, but I gotta say it now because I haven't said it in a long time. Ukraine was only supposed to last 2 to 3 days, at best, around 48 hours or just a little more. We are now in day 45 of this war, and the Ukrainians have not only held their ground, but they have pushed the Russians back across half of the country. Now, that is an achievement in itself. And at this point, I have to say, the history books will remember, regardless how the war goes at this point, that the Ukrainians put up one hell of a fight. Now to go over the schedule for tonight. First, we'll be covering the Northern Front, which only has a little bit of news today, but it is big news nonetheless. Also, the location unknowns will be included in the same category. Then we'll start moving on down towards the Kharkiv area, and in between the location unknowns and the Kharkiv area, we'll answer about 3 to 5 questions from the chat. We will then move on down to the Kharkiv area, cover the news that occurred in Zaporizhia, the Donbass in general, as well as the news in Kharkiv and Izyum. We will then stop to take 3 to 5 more questions. This will actually be the shortest segment of the night. And then we will go back to reporting the news from the Mariupol area, also in the Crimea, and then we'll include all of the international news we've gotten today, which is actually a somewhat sizable amount. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone once again for coming. It's, of course, a big thing, and I'm very honored to know that so many people show up and they love the stream, and I thank y'all all so much. And also, just say this, I know this is probably going to make a lot of people a little sad tonight, but we are going to try and compress this stream a little, because tomorrow we'll be setting out really early in the morning to go and start filming for our first video on this channel. It's going to be groundbreaking for this channel, considering that it's the first video of its kind. It's going to be incredibly good. Matthew and me are super excited about this video, so I hope y'all understand that we're just trying to make sure that we are well set tomorrow to go out and film an amazing video for y'all. So, with that being said, we're now going to get to the news. I'm really excited about that, honestly, y'all, and I hope y'all are too, because it's going... I mean, like, not to keep on hyping it up, but it's going to be a very good video. We've got a great topic. I spoiled it a couple of days ago, but I'm going to make sure not to do that anymore. But it's going to be good. I promise y'all. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the news in Kyiv. The first bit of news before we move on to the big stuff that happened today is that there was a Russian IED found strapped to one of the rail guards on the side of the road near Kyiv. You can hardly spot it, really, unless if it was for this massive yellow outline around it. But it is a 122 millimeter shell that was duct taped to the side of this railing. I'm supposing, and you can also see the wiring there that appears to set it up as an IED of sorts. Looks like the Russians didn't use it, and I believe the police are completely fine with it being here because it may be inert at this point. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on it taking pictures and also walking around it because it could explode and kill them all. But nonetheless, it does show, because we do know that the Ukrainians were using IEDs near the later, I guess the later phase of the Northern Front. And it looks like the Russians were starting to rig up IEDs themselves to use against the Ukrainians. Of course, we don't really know if they would be used against civilian or military targets. It really could be either one, depending on the mood of the commander. But nonetheless, it's interesting to see that the Russians were also starting to delve into that area as well. But it looks like they weren't around that front for much longer to actually use it, and for us to see what would have happened if it was used. Thank the Lord we didn't. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of big news. This morning, everyone in Britain woke up, well, actually yesterday, over like 24 hours ago, everyone in Britain woke up and they said, boy, what a wonderful day. I wonder what our government is doing. And they didn't know until a picture came out on the official Twitter account of the British government showing that Boris Johnson had arrived in the city of Kyiv completely unannounced. This wasn't on his itinerary or publicized. He just arrived in Kyiv and met Zelensky. It was very weird that it happened so unannounced. It didn't have any build up to it or anything, even up to the hour. It was literally no news, and then all of a sudden there's a picture of him walking around in Kyiv. And honestly, when I heard that, I was like, that is insane. First off, that he's gone to a war-torn country that is literally in the middle of a war. And, you know, Kyiv has only been the Kyiv Oblast has only been liberated for about a week at this point. And secondly, it's very crazy to me that pretty much the second most powerful country in the Western world, at least militarily, I know the Japanese are actually a larger economic power, but I guess you could call them in the Eastern world, although they're more aligned towards the West. But that's kind of like a whole discussion I have in my head with myself. Maybe we'll make a video about that in the future. But anyways, they're the second largest power behind the United States in terms of militarily in the Western world. And so it was very weird to see the leader of that country, considering the actual size and scale of it, to be in the middle of the capital of a country that is currently in a war. It was very neat, but nonetheless, I'm going to show y'all one of the pictures that they got. So you can see here he is with Zelensky walking around the capital. Of course, they have a load of armed bodyguards around. You have two heads of state in one area, which is bizarre, and it's also bizarre that they're in the middle of Kyiv. You can see here Boris Johnson. Now, I know that the British people have opinions just like Americans do about their political parties. You know, there's the Conservatives, which are also called the Tories, and then there's the Labour Party. And you know, I don't really get into politics in America, and I'm not going to get into British politics either. But nonetheless, love or hate the guy, you've got to respect his commitment to supporting Ukraine. And also the fact that he's actually traveled to Ukraine and gone to the capital and met Zelensky in person. That says a lot about the guy's character, although a lot of people don't really support what he does domestically inside Britain, and a lot of people do support it, but we're not getting into that. We're just looking at this one event on the surface. I gotta say, pretty stand-up thing to do here, just to leave it at that. When you see in the next picture, of course, they're now walking around more of Kyiv. Very interestingly enough, it looks like this internal part of Kyiv, kind of like the downtown area, at least in these pictures, wasn't too badly damaged. We don't see any evidence of rubble. We also don't see that windows have been blown out from explosions, which is very interesting. And I wonder what part of the city this is specifically. I feel like it may have been around the Maidan, which is more towards the central part. We can also see another picture. Boris Johnson's hair is usually known famously to be very frilly, and actually I've heard that he does that deliberately to make himself seem a little bit more comical and for people to take him less seriously, so that way he can pull the wool over their eyes in a way. At least that's what I've heard and rumored, but today it doesn't look as frilly as it usually is. In the next picture, we can see them once again walking down the street. In the next one, we can see what can be here. Maybe to be assumed as some kind of memorials to fallen soldiers. I'm not entirely sure. It looks like there's a little picture in there along with some inscriptions. So if it is, highest respect to the dead that the Ukrainians have suffered through either this war, the Donbass conflict, or wars that came before. And so we're going to move on to the next picture. We can see here that they are once again walking around. They have a little vendor stand. That's a really nice vendor stand. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the last picture, where we can see a sign that has a heart. So I'm guessing it says "I love Ukraine" because it says Ukraine in Ukrainian. And so it looks like Zelensky and him are chatting it up really well. I don't really know specifically what they talked about. I saw little clips of them walking around, but it never gave me a long enough clip for me to hear the discussion that Boris was having with Zelensky. And Zelensky was actually talking English to Boris Johnson, which was incredibly interesting as well. They didn't need a translator. We're now going to move on to the next bit of video evidence, well, actually a news piece that we got from the BBC News talking about Boris Johnson's visit to Ukraine. First off, the meeting was huge because primarily Boris Johnson announced that there would be more weapons heading in Ukraine's direction. Also today we got the figure that 770 million pounds of money in aid had been sent to Ukraine, and they upped that number during this meeting. That's an incredibly high amount. The European Union has given $1 billion, and now they've added an additional, well, 1 billion euros, and then they added an additional 500 million euros on top of that. So the British alone have given now 770 million pounds, and so they're getting close to the billion mark, and they're actually about halfway to the amount that the entirety of the European Union has given in support of Ukraine, which is incredibly interesting. Of course, as usual, as most Western leaders have been doing, Boris Johnson condemned the Russians' despicable attacks on civilians. I do have to agree that that's actually a very adept word. I don't believe I've used it on stream, but I would have to say that the attacks on civilians are despicable, and that's another good word to describe them as. Boris Johnson congratulated Zelensky on pushing back the Russians from Kyiv. That was a huge deal, and we were here when it happened on this channel. Of course, we reported the day that it occurred, and it was insane. It was like that was something that no one ever expected to happen. And if I pull up old news articles, which let me know in the chat as I continue talking if you would like me to. We can go back and all revisit about a month ago when all the news articles, including some of the major YouTube channels, were talking about the Russians are going to regroup and they're going to take over Kyiv and the war will be over if we want to go back down memory lane. So let me know. I'm going to turn on the chat real quick so I can see. And if everyone wants to do that, we will take a minute to stroll down memory lane and laugh at all those people who turned out to be wrong. So anyways, the last bit... that last bit isn't really anything. That's more like a philosophical thing. The greatest broken promise. The thing is, though, is that they're acting like the UN broke its promise to uphold world's security and peace in this one instance, and it's the first time they've ever done it. But if you ever look at the history of the United Nations, they've never really done anything meaningful. Hate to say it, because you wish that an organization like that could do something, but historically, everything they do just equals up to nothing. And so finally, the last bit of news we've gotten from Kyiv is a picture of the meeting that Boris Johnson and Zelensky had inside of a government building. Very nice wall decorations. Not really a big fan of the flowers, but, I do have to respect the craftsmanship and the work that went into this. Very nice. And nonetheless, I don't know exactly what they said because I couldn't find any videos that were uninterrupted long enough for me to say, oh, that's what they're saying. I couldn't. So sadly, all we have is really pictures of the event and also a news article. Once again, I would love to say this. Now, this is good news. I actually fixed the map problem. Although it deleted all of the markers from the past 2 days on this map, and those 2 days are lost to history, you'll just have to watch the streams from those 2 days to see what happened on them. This day actually does work. So that's why there's only markers for day 3 of this week on the map. So if you would like to click on the map and take a look, we once again have it back up and online. So we're now going to move out of the Kyiv area to the location unknowns. But before I do, I'm going to check the chat real quick, see if everyone wants to take a stroll down memory lane. Let's see. Everyone seems good with moving forward. There's a few of y'all there who would like to watch, but I'm sorry. Seems like the majority of people would like to just move on. So we're going to move on to the location unknowns, and we're going to check out this variety of manpads that were in this one spot. Now, it's neat to see the variety, but one thing that always concerns me with variety is that you have to supply different kinds of ammunition, and those require completely separate supply lines in a way to run them. But nonetheless, it was a very neat photo. You can actually see 3 different manpads in one spot. We have a Stinger, an Igla, and a Piorin. I've never heard of the Polish Piorin before, but it's really cool to see all 3 of them side by side. One thing, though, once again, I do have to say, because this has to be seriously reiterated, and also I'm going to address something I saw in the comments, like the other day, and I was like, that's a good point, but, there's kind of a little bit of a extra caveat to it. These have to be supplied different kinds of ammo. An Igla does not use the same, anti-air missile in a way that a Stinger does. Neither does a Piorin, most likely. So all 3 of these have to have different ground-to-air missiles in a way. I'm not exactly what they're called. The specific name is for a manpad. I don't try and delve into that, and I'm not really one to get into the specific terminology. So sorry if that bugs anyone. But nonetheless, I'm like, because if you have 3 different systems, that's 3 different kinds of ammo, and you have to find them, and then you have to send them to those units, and you have to prioritize which one. Well, not prioritize, you have to categorize who gets what, and that's a huge deal, and that complicates a whole bunch of stuff. Like, if they had nothing but Stingers, great, you could send the Stinger ammunition everywhere, and everyone's going to be able to use Stinger ammunition, but someday, Stinger ammunition might be sent to one area of the front to a certain unit, and then it's like, oh, well, we used the Igla, which uses a different kind of missile. And then it's like, oh, God, now we got to go find the ammo for the Igla, which I'm sure is really easy for them. I actually think probably the hardest ammo for them to find is for the Stinger, since it's a Western system. And so that stuff has to be imported. But nonetheless, it's a really neat photo, not detracting it with all the logistics talk. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian sniper set up with a really cool tripod behind this BMP-2. So here's the video of that. gotta say, we're gonna go back to the tripod part. If I can get it right there. It's pretty neat. I mean, I don't really think this is the perfect spot for the sniper to be hidden, but I don't really think it's about being hidden. I think this is about more so being effective. And so that was a really interesting thing to see the sniper with a tripod set up right beside a BMP-2. Of course, he's Ukrainian. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Russian troops retreating after their vehicles were blown up nearby. Interesting video, so I'm going to let you all watch it. First off, you can see the vehicles burning right there near the road. I believe those are the vehicles. And you can see the Russians in the trench here that it appears they have dug out. I'm not really sure where this is. We do know that there was a decent amount of semi-permanent trench works, if you'd like to call them that, in the Donbass. So I don't know if this is in the Donbass and they're falling back from a fortified position there in a village. But now we can see them in a large group starting to move away from the burning vehicles where their little dugout was. And they're starting to try and get out of there. You know, I know that was a really scientific description. They're just trying to get out of there. So the video does continue. As you can see, they're meandering their way out. Looks like one of them's taking a break to tie a shoe or something. Can't really tell. Now he is back up and on the walk. We're now moving down an alley in between two long buildings. I wonder what they talk about as they walk, if they do talk at all. I wonder if they're like, hey, you know, this war's going pretty bad. It kind of sucks. You know, because I feel like that would be something that I'd be saying in that situation if I was there. I'd be like, hey, you know, the tank just got blown up. Like, we can't make ground anywhere. This war is kind of a little bad. Not really having a fun time in the first place, and it's not even a funner time when you're losing all the time. So, with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see Ukrainian BTR get destroyed. Also, to address something, I guess I'll address both these points. Some people say, and I see it a good bit, and I want to make this clarification as clear as possible for new viewers and return viewers, that I am biased in a way. Yes, to answer that question, it's a little bit more complicated than just a simple yes or no. But yes, I am pro-Ukrainian. So I do support the Ukrainians, and sometimes my statements will be geared more towards supporting Ukraine. But with that in mind, when I look at a tactical situation or a strategic situation, and we look at the situation on the ground, I say what I think is going to happen, and I put no bias into that. Because putting bias into it could lead people to being shocked, and it's just stupid, because if the situation on the ground isn't good, and I'm sitting here going, oh, you know, the Ukrainians will push them back, and then the Russians encircle them, that's not good. So, you know, as far as my stance, yes, I am pro-Ukrainian, but as far as what I say, I try and keep it neutral as to the actual assessments of the situation. And to address another thing, which I was supposed to address with the man-pads, there was an M4 kind of weapon the other day that I asked the chat to identify, and a lot of people identified it as different things, but someone said it couldn't have been an M4 because 5.56 is a round they don't have. The thing is that if you have a limited supply of M4s, while it may be hard to supply those specific weapons with that specific kind of ammunition, it's such a small amount of weapons that have been issued that it shouldn't be too much of a problem. So with that answer, I hope that's kind of answered the reason why an M4 can be there, and we've already seen M4s before in other pictures. We're now going to move on to this video of the Ukrainian BTR being destroyed. Not exactly sure where this is, of course, is a location unknown, but you can see the BTR down here, and apparently this was a Orion drone, which was the drone that got shot down yesterday in the pictures, and so here's the video of the BTR being destroyed. Very unfortunate. Hopefully that doesn't throw too much of a wrench into the Ukrainian defensive positions in that area, but with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Stugnas in action once again. So check out this video. It actually shows a couple of vehicles being destroyed. See here, they're taking a look at the tank. So now they're just sitting there watching the tank. It's always so weird to me. It's like a stalking thing. So they launched the Stugna. The missile's on the way. And it hits the tank. Dead on. Good stuff, you know?
Внимание, выстрел! Блядь, в чем дело? Есть. Внимание, выстрел!
Once again, I would like to mention this again. It's really interesting and always cool to see that this is one of the Saudi Arabian export versions that was supposed to be sent to Saudi Arabia, but ended up staying in Ukraine due to the war. So that's always really cool to see, and I'm like, wow, that's neat. Because, I mean, you know, I went into this whole entire little like rabbit hole the other night, so I won't go into it too much. You'll probably know why. So as you see, another Stugna is being launched towards the tank. Missiles on the way. Unfortunately, I can't see it on the screen, but it does hit right there. So I'm sure with those two hits, that tank is totally wiped out.
Yes!
So now they've hit another vehicle. I think in the description it actually said that this was a TOS 1, so that's really cool. That's really neat to know that they took out another war crime machine in a way. And so finally, in this last clip of film, we can see another vehicle moving through the tree line, and it looks like they're trying to line that vehicle up to be hit. And then they hit that one. And so 3 vehicles hit by the same Stugna crew in the same spot. Now that is something. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see an Igla being used against a Russian helicopter on a rooftop. This is a very interesting video. You can kind of see the helicopter in the footage. It kind of looked like a Ka-52, like the post suggests, but due to me not being able to see it well enough, I omitted that from my title. So with that, here's the footage. You can hear it coming. This guy who's filming, he gets down as low as he can onto the rooftop. But of course, the guy with the manpad, he can't like lay down on the roof. So he's sitting there with the Igla and he's aiming it at the helicopter. Also, what's interesting is that he's wearing a green armband, which is kind of a rare thing that we haven't seen before. And so, wait a minute, let's take a good look if we can. There's a little dot. Yeah, sadly, it's just, I mean, like, I saw this earlier. I just wanted to make sure again. You just can't tell what that thing is, sadly. I hate that. I wonder if they hit it, though, because we didn't get a follow-up on this video. It's just that the missile launches, and then we don't get to see if it hit, sadly. But nonetheless, it's very interesting to see some rooftop manpad action. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a captured Russian vehicle. Well, actually 2 of them. I believe it's a BMP-3 and a BTR-82, but now they're being used by Ukraine, painted up with Ukrainian flags all over them and flying Ukrainian flags. It's a very neat video. I don't know what they're engaging in this video, but nonetheless, very cool to see that the Ukrainians are not only capturing Russian vehicles and taking them out of the war for the Russians, but they're actually bringing them back to the front lines on their side. Very neat to see. So I'm going to rewind the video to the start. You can see over here that the BTR-82 is firing. And it generally seems that the BMP-3 is just kind of sitting there. But still, very neat. It's very cool to see. So we're now going to move on from that video, and we're going to move to this next clip of Location Unknown News, where we see the Ukrainians capture even more equipment, hopefully to be repurposed. Of course, this one doesn't look like it, though. This is a Mitsubishi howitzer. I actually found out the other day, this was interesting news to me, that there's not just a Mista SPG, there's also a Mista artillery piece as well. When you see here another picture of that same Mista, and then finally in this one, it appears that this is some kind of BTR-60 perhaps, because it doesn't have the BTR-82 turret. So once again, good captured equipment. We can also see an O on the front of this vehicle, which does confirm that it is a Russian vehicle that was captured. I don't see a lot more videos anymore of Ukrainian farmers capturing the tanks themselves. It looks like the Ukrainian army is kind of taking it upon themselves to make sure that they get some of the loot, and it looks like they're not only getting it, but they're using it, which is great to see. Maybe some of the farmers as well are actually donating their captured tanks to the Ukrainians, so that way they can bolster their armor supply, which is a good thing to know. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we see this cute little puppy. Apparently, the Ukrainians just have mascots all over now, I'm guessing, but it's guarding an ammo can. It actually puts its hand on the bullets, which was really sweet. But anyways, here's the video. Look at that. That's really sweet. I like that. I like that little puppy. That's one hell of a mascot right there. I hope that they actually keep that, I hope they keep that thing as a mascot for that unit through the rest of the war, and that becomes like a patch or something, because I think that's a cute little dog, and that'd be a nice little patch. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see liberated Ukrainians. Now, we actually had a picture of this specific event. It was days ago. I believe it may have even been a week ago. But I didn't know that Starlink system was being used inside of liberated areas of Ukraine. And now we know that liberated families who have had their phone services and internet services interrupted by the occupation, they've been able to call their families over the Starlink system. So I have to say, the Starlink system has now gotten a whole new level of usability based off of this. I've got to say, now I've got a huge respect for Elon Musk sending that system over there and allowing them to use it, and kind of using it as a first base of operations for it, because it's been used incredibly well, and I'm so glad it's used for families to get in touch with each other and make sure they're all right. So here's the video right here. Hopefully it can pop up. There we go. And so here's the video of people gathered around the Starlink dishes calling back their family. I'm going to turn this down a little bit so hopefully YouTube won't, like, get me. As you can see, they finally called their children and told them they were safe. So I'm going to turn back up. Hopefully there's not... Ah, there's music. So nonetheless, you can see people gathered around. They're talking to their sons and such. But isn't that nice? That's very nice that they've been able to actually get in touch with their family and tell them, I'm alright, I made it through. Because people over there in Ukraine are so worried, considering they're hearing about the mass graves and the executions. What if my mother or my dad or my son or daughter was one of those people? And now they're getting to know that they weren't those people, and that they actually made it through alive. And I gotta say, that guy, I can agree with that guy. Thank you, Elon Musk. Also, look, we got a New York Yankees fan. But that's wonderful. I'm glad to see that. I'm glad that that's a thing. And so we're now going to move on to the last bit of location unknown news. Once again, it revolves around dogs. We're actually getting a lot of news about dogs being used by the Ukrainians for multiple different kinds of jobs. But it seems now that they've gotten a shipment of Belgian Shepherd puppies from somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where the shipment came from. The post wasn't really specific about that. But nonetheless, we can see the Ukrainians carrying them around. And I believe that little dog that we saw at the ammo can was also a Belgian Shepherd puppy. But let me pull that up and let me make sure that is a correct statement. I don't think so. It actually looked a little bit more different than that. So we're going to go on to the video. Well, actually, it's pictures. I'm sorry, correction. It's pictures. But nonetheless, it's just a nice little thing. Look at that little puppy. The guy's carrying it like it's a grenade, I like that. Anyways, on to the next picture. You can see another little Belgian Shepherd right here. In the next one, you can see another Belgian Shepherd puppy. They're currently being distributed to the units, and apparently they're going to grow up with the units and be trained. I don't think they'll grow... Obviously, they're not going to grow up in time to be useful in this war, but they will be useful for years to come for the Ukrainians, and will hopefully become an important part of their defensive structure and part of the operations to hopefully locate explosives, if that's what these dogs will be used for. Anyways, just very sweet little puppies. Very, very happy to see that there's such sweet little dogs out there that the Ukrainians are able to use for good causes and make sure that people stay safe. And hopefully the little puppies will stay safe as well when they grow up into full-size dogs that are trained. And so with that, we've covered all the news in Kyiv, and we've also covered the location unknown news. But before we move on to the questions, there's actually one bit of news that I would like to include in kind of like the Northern Front location unknown news, and that is what's happened in Bryansk today. There has been a sighting of 2 Su-24s flying incredibly low over the city, and there's been some speculation that these may have been in fact Ukrainian Su-24s going towards a target further on in the country. This was posted 4 hours ago, so it may be entirely possible that it is the case that these are Ukrainian Su-24s that were going towards a target inside of Russia. So anyways, here's the video from the tweet. Hopefully it wasn't deleted. There they are. You can see it right there. That's really interesting. Hopefully we get some news, and maybe this is another daring and successful raid that the Ukrainians have been able to conduct deep inside of Russian territory on some kind of strategic or military target. And so with that, we've actually covered all of the Northern Front news, and we're now going to move on towards the Kharkiv area and the Donbass. But before we do, we're going to answer 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
So good evening, everybody. Again, this is Enforcer Matt. It's good to be with you again on day 45 of the news. And first up tonight, we have a super chat from Mike Thompson, who puts in a donation of $25. He says, number 1, please quit apologizing for taking Mondays off. If someone objects, you don't need them. Number 2, I've been married to a history major for 57 years. She's a very capable person. And number 3, let's hear it for the Leaf Spring Army.
Let's hear it for the Leaf Spring Army. We're going to try, well, actually, we're not trying. We will have Leaf Spring merch out on Tuesday, so I hope everyone's hyped for that. That's going to be really neat. But moving on from that, to answer the other 2 things, glad you married a history major. That must be pretty fun. Probably bringing up all kinds of old stuff in the relationship, because that's what they do. Also, the other thing is that I do want to apologize for taking Mondays off, and there's kind of a reason for it. I do not want to really disrupt people's schedules, you see. And I know that I've got like my own thing going, you know, I've got to go and do things, but you know, people do like the streams, and I don't really want them to think that I don't care about the audience or anything, but at the same time, I do have to try and take care of myself. So it's kind of a tough spot, but I do like to apologize so people know that I'm not just like thinking that the audience is like dog water or anything. I respect them a whole deal, and I want them to know that if I didn't really feel like I needed to take the Mondays off, I wouldn't. So, but anyways, I thank you very much for the support. I'm glad you brought all those things up. Very interesting points. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Brooks Precision, who puts in a donation of $20. They say it's the 100th anniversary of complete Russian communist takeover of Ukraine.
Really? That's very interesting. I believe that would be the case, because we do know that the Ukrainians actually helped out the Polish in the Polish-Soviet War of the 1920s. Well, actually, just the one war in 1920. So I thank you very much for the support, and that's very interesting to know. And hopefully, they can make sure that history doesn't repeat itself 100 years later, which it looks like they're doing an incredibly good job of. So with that, thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to 2 more questions, and then we're going to start covering the Kharkiv news and the Donbass news.
And next up, we have a question from Sean L., who puts in a donation of $20. He says, where do Ukrainians keep their POWs?
I'm not really sure where the Ukrainians keep their POWs. We don't even know where the Russians are keeping POWs. It's kind of POW situations are kind of a quiet thing around the entirety of Ukraine. The prisoners are captured. We sometimes see them on film for both sides, and then they disappear, and we don't know where they're going, which is very unfortunate, because I would like to know where the Ukrainian prisoners are going and where the Russian prisoners are going. But nonetheless, we don't really know. So I hate that I can't really answer that question, but I thank you very much for the support, and we will try and find out. I'm sure that's going to be like a post-war thing where we find out that information much later. So I thank you very much for the support. Hope that does answer the question. And with that, we've reached the end of this question segment, and we're now going to move on to the Kharkiv news and the Donbass news as well, and include the news in Zaporizhzhia. So first off, in the area of Kharkiv, we've seen a residential area get shelled, which now suggests, as far as video evidence is concerned, that the Russians are once again bombarding the city. So I'm going to let y'all see that footage real quick. You see people are milling about. Now you can hear the rounds come in incredibly close, shaking the ground and the earth, and people are running for cover behind cars and such. And now you can see that one is hit incredibly close, because it's actually thrown this camera sideways, and now it's got a red tint on it. see that this woman fell to the ground near a tree. Hopefully not from a shrapnel injury, hopefully to protect herself. And as fast as it started, it seems that it's over. Seems like the old lady is stumbling, but it seems now that she's okay. Thank goodness. Glad to see that. And so at the end of that video, you can see, once again, the Russians are beginning to bombard residential areas inside of Kharkiv to either try and make the citizens fearful of the Russians, or to just try and attack some military targets in a vain way where they're mostly targeting civilians. Now moving on to the next bit of news of bombardments that we've seen in Kharkiv today, we've actually seen the Russians doing something new that we've never seen pictures of before, and they're now starting to use bombs with parachutes on them. Now, once again, I'd like to tell everyone, I'm not an expert. Now, I do focus on the general strategy, logistics of things, and so on, but I'm not an expert of the names and the types of every single kind of weapon in the world. I know there are people out there like that, and that's good. I love that people are like that. But the thing is that I can't be like that because I just don't have the time to do it all. So I don't know the exact name of this kind of weapon. I do know of weapons that do use parachutes to kind of guide themselves a little bit better to the target or slow themselves down in the middle of a trajectory. So I don't really know exactly what the case is with this one, but nonetheless, you can see the bomb parachuting down right by an apartment block. Very interesting. We don't really have a lot more news beyond that, but I wonder what the explosive yield of this kind of bomb is. If it's like a Fab 500 or larger. It looks honestly like it'd have a larger explosive yield. And so with that, we're now going to move on from the Kharkiv area, and we're now going to move on down towards Izyum, where we've seen a rare instance today of a Sturm anti-tank, well, not really anti-tank. I guess you could call it like a tank destroyer, although tank destroyers really don't exist. The whole entire purpose of this APC is to fire anti-tank guided missiles at tanks and destroy them. So I kind of consider it to be an anti-tank, well, a tank destroyer. I'm sorry, I said it again. A tank destroyer in a way. So anyways, here's the video. As you can see, there's the Sturm. Just sitting there. What's really cool about the Sturm, now I do know a decent bit about it. It's of course on the MTLB chassis. I'll show that to y'all real quick. MTLB chassis right here. A lot of vehicles in the Russian army are kind of on this chassis. It's a very commonly produced one, and I believe it uses the same kind of suspension, and really like the whole entire chassis system that the PT-76 uses. Nonetheless, when you look at a Sturm is just nothing more than an like a upgraded MTLB in a way. So this is a Sturm. You can see it's the same kind of vehicle, but it has an anti-tank guided missile launcher at the back of it. What's really cool about this vehicle is that the ammo in the tank is actually like a revolver cylinder back there, and when that Sturm fires, this ATGM pivots inwards inside the tank. There's a giant cylinder in there that rotates. It then loads the next round, I believe, into that anti-tank guided missile launcher, and then it pops back up. The entire system, as far as I know, is completely automated, and it's a really interesting kind of like tank destroyer, but nonetheless, it's thinly armored like most are, and I don't really know the range of that ATGM specifically. You know, this is kind of like my general knowledge of what I've read about the vehicle. So I hope that gives a little bit more insight as to what this thing is, but I'm going to let the video continue. And so you can just see it sitting there. And now it's fired its ATGM. A very interesting sound preceded it as well. I don't really know what the sound is, you know, at least mechanically in the vehicle, but let's listen to that again. Hopefully y'all can hear it. Now you can see it drops the tube and the arm. You can see like the little lid pop up for that arm to go inside the vehicle, and then it will then put the arm in the vehicle, and then it'll pick up another ATGM tube, and then it'll lift back out, and it'll be ready to go. Very interesting piece of equipment. I wish I could have a more adept description of its mechanical functions, but unfortunately, I like work 16 hours a day, including college, so sadly I can't. But we're now going to move on towards the Donbass area. We have not gotten any news in Luhansk today, nor the Severodonetsk area, which is starting to look very interesting. Also, let me adjust this Frontline real quick, because the whole entire map didn't update when I refreshed this thing today. So we're going to put that there, and we're now going to do that, so that way it looks nice. All right. Don't have any news here. Of course, my little yellow squiggles have disappeared, but y'all do know that I'm thinking if the Russians were to try anything offensively against Severodonetsk, they're not going to push straight through the town. They're going to try and encircle it and cut it off. It seems like that is the least resistance kind of operation that they can do, and we know that the natural order of things is that the path of least resistance is the best path. That's why militaries exploit weak areas and front lines. We're now going to move on down to the Donbass in the Donetsk area, and we're going to talk about the events that we've seen near Volnovakha, apparently on a front line nearby, and also in the town of Marinka. In the town of Marinka, we've seen once again another DPR artillery strike, this time from drone. Here you can see the town of Marinka very much destroyed. It looks like the level of damage here is actually high, and we can see what appears to be 2 armored personnel carriers. It looks like this one's a BMP series, maybe a BMP-1, and it looks like this also may be another BMP-1 somewhere on the side of the road. I'm not really sure if these are Ukrainian vehicles, if they were occupied or abandoned. All we know is that they're on the side of the road. So we can see that the first artillery hit, stand by, hit the vehicle on the top side of the screen, almost dead on, it seems. We don't see anything about the second vehicle, which we can now see down there. And now the drone camera is starting to move forward. And now it's starting to move backwards towards the tanks again. Now I can't really tell where the tanks are. I guess we're just waiting for more artillery hits to land, so that way this the drone or the pilot of the drone can adjust the fire of the artillery. We can now see the artillery landing dead on in the middle of the road. And so that's the end of that video. Very typical, really, in a way. There's been a lot of videos of artillery strikes and Stugna attacks, so there's not really much to comment on them after a length of time, because, you know, it's really just the same thing repeating itself. But it is nonetheless a very interesting thing to see, because we could see clearly in this video that, you know, once again, we're seeing a drone in action as an artillery spotter. Now, something interesting, not to spoil the video, but we did get a drone, and I thank everyone so much for the support, because it does help us to get stuff to help film videos with. But we got a drone today so that way we can take camera shots, and it finally arrived in the mail. So we set the thing up and we flew it around, and we actually found out that this is one of the exact same drones that the Ukrainians use a heavy deal as kind of like a forward scout or an artillery observer, which was really interesting because we actually got to see the mechanical limitations, at least on our version, in action. It has a range of about 4 miles. It can fly up to about 300 feet up. You know, that's before it starts violating FAA regulations here in the United States. I don't really know if it has a limiter, or as people would call it, a governor on it like that in Ukraine, considering that it is a wartime situation. I don't really know the flight restrictions that the Ukrainians have put in place for drones. But it was very interesting to see, because we were actually able to fly it around and kind of play with it a bit to test it out and make sure that it would be able to operate in high winds, because we have a lot of high winds around here right now. And it was just very interesting to observe. And so now when I see these drones flying around, it's just odd, because you know that the operator probably, if they're Ukrainian, maybe even Russian as well, are just sitting there with an iPhone attached to a remote controller, and they're just flying this thing around like it's some kind of video game system, like an Xbox or PS. So we're now going to move on from that video to the next one down near Volnovakha, where we can see a video taken inside of a Russian ambulance, very rare bit of footage, we haven't seen anything like it, of Russian wounded soldiers being evacuated from the battlefield. We just haven't seen this, and this was really cool to me, so I'm going to let y'all see it, because it's something. It actually shows the Russians taking wounded off the field. So we can see here, it looks like this guy may have burned his hand, or something like it. And then on this side of the vehicle, we can see a guy who has something of a very impromptu sling, and it also looks like he has some bandages on his hands, and may have taken some kind of laceration to the wrists, as well as his fingers, because it appears that the blood's pooling around his fingers, but nowhere else. Also, it looks like he may have taken some kind of cut to the upper part of his arm. We can see a medic trying to attend to him somewhere on his leg. And so this is just interesting because we've never seen the inner workings of an ambulance on the Russian side, or a Ukrainian ambulance at that, in this war. So this is a first of a kind video in a way. Also, another thing I'd like to mention, considering that we saw wounded Russians, and that kind of like brings us to Russians in general, I got on Reddit today, and I would just like for someone to confirm this in the chat because I never saw it, but I heard something about it, of a video coming out of and it's terrible to say. I don't even really want to say it, but it was a Russian doing very vile acts with a toddler. And I was wondering, I hope to God no one watched that, because first off, people distributing that kind of thing is a felony. Second off, that's just so sick. If I even found it, I wouldn't have watched it. But I've got to know, did anyone actually see proof that that was out there anywhere? Because if so, I think that we need to make some kind of concerted effort as a community to find out the specific name of the Russian that perpetrated that heinous crime, considering it was especially filmed. That's just sick. So if someone can let me know, we'll bring that up in the next question segment. And if that is the case and that was a true story, maybe we can have some sleuths here in our chat who can figure out what Russian did that such a terrible crime, so that way we can maybe start trying to do like a whole internet search thing and find out who this sicko is. So we're now going to move on from that to the area of Zaporizhia, and then we're going to move on to our next question segment. And here in Zaporizhia, we can see a very sad and sweet video. It's kind of mixed emotions in a way, of a grandfather holding a baby. Apparently it must be his grandchild, while they're trying to evacuate from the city of Zaporizhia today. So I'm going to let y'all see this video right here. It has copyrighted music in it, so unfortunately I can't play any audio. But a terrible situation. The old and the young are having to flee from an area that may be embroiled in warfare soon, or just too dangerous to live in due to Russian artillery strikes and such. Well, it's terrible to see, and I'm glad to know that this grandfather is keeping this grandchild as safe as possible, and that he's not going to let this child out of his sight, because you don't know what will happen to him if the Russians get their hands on him, considering if that story I heard today as a rumor was true. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next question segment before we move on to the Mariupol news and the Crimean news, and then the international news as well. And so what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so pardon me just for a moment. I was trying to get rid of a bot, but moving on to the first question up that we have is from DC90, who puts in a very generous donation of $50. He says, "Hey, Enforcer and Matt, I hope you're having a great weekend. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the Su-24 the Soviet version of the F-111 low-altitude interdiction aircraft? If so, I'll bet they were Ukrainian."
I think it kind of is. I don't really know the exact development philosophy behind the Su-24, because, sometimes aircraft are made in both air forces as a direct response to another. Like the Su-27 was kind of designed near the same time that the F-15 was, and the idea is that the Su-27 would be a direct counter to the F-15, or it was the other way around. I haven't really ever understood the story because I've heard it both ways, and I'm like, I wonder what that is. So I don't know if it was built as a direct response to the F-111 and trying to get those capabilities for the Russians, but let's pull that up and see. F-1 is the Su-24 the Russian version of the F-111? Are totally different in design. Well, obviously, yes, but were these two serve the same purpose? So let's look at this. Let's see the amount of ordnance that it can carry under the, specification sheet on Wikipedia. Sorry about that, but let's see here. Performance, armament. It has 9 hard points, and it can carry up to 17,000 pounds, 17,600 pounds of munitions. Let's see what the F-111 can do. F-111. F-111 was a neat aircraft. Don't really know much about it, but it just looks really cool. That's not really anything to base anything off of strategically, but nonetheless, it's an interesting looking vehicle. This can actually carry 31,000 pounds, which I believe is about, if we look here, twice as much as the Su-24. So I would say that the Su-24 was kind of heading in that direction, I guess. But in terms of its actual abilities, it looks like it's very much more hindered than the F-111 in terms of how much ordnance it can carry. So I hope that does answer the question in a way. And I thank you so much for the huge support, man. It does help out this channel a lot, and it helps us to look forwards into the future. And so I thank you so much once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, just to give you an answer to that question you asked earlier, people are saying that the incident with the toddler actually was true, which is absolutely disgusting. And they say that his name was Alexei Beachkov, I believe is how you pronounce it. Absolutely disgusting. I saw somebody just a moment ago say that there was a link in the Discord. Now, hopefully there's not, because we're going to have to remove that because we can't have that kind of content in the Discord or anywhere. That's horrific, and we can't have that there. But yeah, from what people were saying, it is true.
I hope you didn't send that video to me in the Discord. I'm not going to watch that. I'm actually going to delete that immediately. If it's good to know that it's true, so that way we can get the name of this sick criminal. And golly, that kind of stuff is so sick that even thinking about it right now, that makes me want to just throw up, honestly, because that, yeah. I'm gonna try and keep off of that, because if I think about that too much, it's gonna throw me off. So, it's good to know that we got the name out there. We're gonna make sure to put that name in the Discord as well, somewhere, so that way we can make sure that that sick bastard gets held accountable for such a sick, nasty crime as that. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And also, thank you everyone for giving me the name of that guy and telling me that that is in fact true. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Old Salty Squid, who puts in a $20 donation. He says, "Thanks for all you guys do. If you decide to start a news channel after this, I will definitely be a supporter. I would like my donation to go to your next day off. Slava Ukraine."
Thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you're going to help me on my day off. It may not be a day off depending on what we're doing with the video filming. We don't really know yet. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I will make sure to try and use it the best I can on the day off, or towards the channel. I really like the idea of using it more towards the channel, but I thank you so much for the support once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Paul, who says, "Is Ukraine know the size or strength of the anticipated offense?"
I don't think they know that without external help. I'm sure that the United States is, of course, sending them satellite footage, and I'm sure if they are, we'll actually see that very soon in almost up-to-date footage of Russian military buildups in the area, like we did see the 40-mile-long convoy as it was sitting there day after day. Hopefully we do, but at the moment, we are not even sure if there have been units moved into the area to begin conducting large offensives, because we haven't seen any noticeable increases in the fighting in that area. It seems to be pretty steady as it once was. And so I think, as of now, and this is just kind of the current assessment, this may change, but as of now, it looks like the Russians may have withdrawn the northern forces completely from the fight, and that they're not going to be returning anywhere on any front line. But that could change as the days go on, but that's what it's looking like right now. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question in a way. And so we're going to move on to one more question, and then we're going to start covering the Mariupol news, the Crimea news, and then the international news we have.
And the last question of the segment goes to a very long-time channel supporter, Zeta Lane, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "I'm happy to see so many old weapons getting used up because replacements will be NATO compliant. In addition, do you think Ukraine should rebuild their rail system to be compatible with Western Europe?"
I do think they should. The gauge transfer in between country to country is a major deal, and it does stop trains from actually moving from one country to another nonstop. I believe, I'm not exactly sure about this. Let's pull up the railway gauges map. Railway gauges map. Sorry about misspelling that, but yeah, you know. So we can see that pretty much all of Europe, including Poland and most of the former Warsaw Pact countries, use standard gauge rail, which is what we use here in the United States. The Ukrainians, the Russians, and pretty much most of the former Soviet Union uses Russian gauge, which is actually much wider than standard gauge. So I'm guessing maybe we can look at Google Maps. Google Maps. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So we're going to go over to Ukraine. I'm going to look at the border because there are railroads that do cross the border. And we're going to see if there is some kind of like gauge change that they have to do there, because if so, that'll be really interesting to actually see. But let me see if I can find any railroads here. There's got to be some railroads. I know there's some kind of railroads. Okay, so here we have it. Let's see if there's a gauge change here. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's a specific noticeable gauge change on satellite footage when entering Poland. Maybe further down the line, there was a gauge change here. I can't tell. The satellite footage is too grainy. But I mean, like, the gauge is different in Ukraine. I just can't really find where the gauge change happens on the border. Maybe it happens in the specific railroad depot. So it's like standard gauge up to Lviv, and then there's like a standard gauge, and then Russian gauge railroads in one depot. I'm not exactly sure how that kind of like breaks down in a way. But if that is the case, that is really interesting to know. And I think that if they have had to have destroyed most of their railway logistics system and kind of like the network, I think they should rebuild it to standard gauge so that way it'll be compatible with Western systems. And also, that would be a huge crick in the neck to the Russians if for some reason they did try and invade Ukraine again. Their railroad logistics units wouldn't be able to work at all or even have the chance to do so because the entirety of Ukraine would be operating on standard gauge instead of Russian gauge. So hope that answers that part of the question. And then the second part of the question was it was a good thing. I believe this was the second part. Hopefully Matthew could confirm. Is that it's a good thing that Ukrainian weapons are being replaced with a Western standard. Is that a correct assessment of the first part?
So let's see. Happy to see so many old weapons getting used up because replacements will be NATO compliant. Yes.
Okay, yes, I do agree with that as well. And another thing is that while the old weapons can be used up, some of them are actually pretty good. Like the Stugna is a brand new system designed and introduced in 2014. And so while it's not exactly Western designed, it is an incredibly good design. And I hope that it does start to see a large amount of purchase orders made by Western countries to bring that into their inventory. Because as we can see in this war, it appears to have innate advantages considering that the operating crew of the system can be hiding somewhere behind cover and that the enemy tank will never see them, but they will get hit by the missile nonetheless. I think that's an incredible advantage that not a lot of weapon systems have. And so, in some regards, it's good to see the old systems being used up and the Ukrainians get a whole bunch of new Western stuff or get replacements for their older stuff that's slightly newer or slightly modified. But nonetheless, I do agree that it is a good thing to see some of the older stuff being used up and new stuff coming in to replace it. So I thank you very much for the support, Z-Lane. You've been around here for like forever in a week, and I thank you so much for it. It means a lot to us to have a huge load of support come from our viewers. It helps us to keep going. And so thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to 2 more questions, and then we're going to end this question segment and move on to the Mariupol news.
All right. So the next question is from Liv WYA Radio, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Hey Enforcer, thanks for the work you're doing. I was going to visit Ukraine in the last month, but had to cancel my trip. If the UK supply Ukraine with anti-ship weapons, how would this impact the war?"
It's going to impact the war in a significant way, considering if the Ukrainians are supplied with the anti-ship weapons that the British are promising, and we'll touch on that news in a bit. It's going to mean that the Russian Navy will probably not be able to operate with a in safety, I guess that's a better way of saying it, within 75 miles of the coast, or they'll fall under the direct threat of being fired on. So if we measure out 75 miles from the coast, that means 75 miles from Odessa is all the way out here. So to draw up a line, we'll measure it from here as well, not to get really like into it or anything. 75 miles out. Phew, wow, yeah, that's really far. The Russian Navy would not be able to operate any closer to the Ukrainian coast than this black line right here. And so if they do get Harpoon anti-ship missiles, look at how much of the Azov Sea that's going to cut off to them. They will no longer be able to plan naval invasions, most likely, although I think they probably abandoned the only one they were thinking of. Also, Matthew, we can hear your mic. But to move on from that, if they won't be able to operate any closer to the coast anymore, and I think that they'll have to abandon any naval invasion ideas that they already have. So I think the anti-ship missiles will be a huge deal, considering that the Ukrainians have apparently a small supply of them because they've been asking for some anti-ship missiles from the West, which suggests that they have a very small inventory of their own. And so hopefully those are used to great effect, or they're an incredible deterrent against naval operations in the Black Sea for the Russians. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to go to our final question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the Mariupol news.
And the final question of the segment goes to Russell, who puts in a $20 donation. He says, after escalating terror with rail station attack, do you think Putin wouldn't be just as happy if world isolated Russia, or did he think future victims needed yet another object lesson so they don't fight?
I think I'm not really sure how to interpret the Kramatorsk attack. It was senseless to the largest degree. There was no military targets around from what we know. It was just directly attacking the train station. Maybe the missiles were really meant to hit inside the depot, you know, like on the rail yard itself. And then they missed, because sometimes while cruise missiles are accurate, they do miss. For example, in the Iraq War, when we tried to hit Saddam Hussein's palace, assuming that Uday and Qusay may have been in there, or Saddam himself, all of the cruise missiles we launched at that palace actually missed and hit some civilians and killed them. Nonetheless, even if that was the case, the massacre that ensued from these missiles landing where they landed was so heinous, you could only assume that it must have been some kind of terror attack more so than an attack on a strategic target. So in that regard, I think if we were to look at it through that angle, they probably, like, Putin probably had that conducted, or some sort of military commander had that conducted, to maybe in their mind strike more fear into the Ukrainians that they should just submit and give up instead of continuing the fight. So I'm not really sure how to take it honestly, because it was so off. It was so off kilter. I mean, it's not off kilter from what the Russians are doing. It's just so off kilter as in how far away it was from the front lines. It's a solid, like, 30 miles from the closest front line. That's like the distance from Kharkiv to Belgorod, and they attacked a train station there. It was just weird. So I'm assuming that it was some kind of terror attack to make the Ukrainians think maybe it'd be better to submit than just get destroyed sitting at a train station. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, that's going to be the end of that question segment. And we're now going to move on to the Mariupol area, the Crimea, and the international news. First off, in Mariupol, we have gotten no news today compared to the past 2 days. We've only gotten 3 bits, but nonetheless, they are 3 interesting pieces of information. The first off bit of news that we've seen in Mariupol is that Chechens were using a rocket launcher once more in Mariupol. Here's the video. They love to show these kinds of videos. Not exactly sure what kind of AT weapons these are. But as we can see here, the first guy runs out. He fires his. He then runs off. The second guy looks like he's ready to try and run around the corner and get a shot off. Look, it's like an amusement ride. They have a line. Yeah, it's got the music. I was just making sure again. Nonetheless, because, you know, if it didn't have the music and it was just the, like, raw ambience, we could actually mute it and hear if they're actually taking any fire, which I'd assume they are not. That's why they're just sitting here like it's some kind of amusement park thing. So now he's standing in the open, you know, he's waiting for his little signal to fire, and now he's going to fire. And then he drops his weapon in a really, really, like, trying to look cool kind of way. Look at that again. Look how he flings it. Lame. Anyways, now you can see some guy lighting up that building over there with an AK. And then now this guy, he's going to light up the building with an AK after he threw the rocket launcher tube. Really, honestly, these videos are really lame. Look at this guy. What he's doing a little ballerina dance. Look at him. And he's also got, like, the little things around his legs like he's some kind of Morris dancer in England. But look at that. I don't even know. I don't even think he's aiming. Like, he's just spraying and tiptoeing around and stuff. That's silly looking. And everything the Chechens put out is kind of silly in a way. But we're going to move on to the next bit of news inside of Mariupol, where we can see... Oh, we don't want to go to Ekstrom Park right now. We can see more Chechens in Mariupol. This, once again, is just another video of Chechens. Hopefully this one doesn't have music. It doesn't. So they're firing inside of a building. I'm not exactly sure where, and I think when I watched this video, if I remember correctly, there wasn't the sound of enemy gunfire coming towards them in this video once more. Yep, I'm right. You can hear them shooting on the street, and also it's somewhere else inside the building. But Ukrainian fire coming back at them? No. Oh my god. You know, it pisses me off, like, really, it does. To see this kind of holding of a rifle. They have not been trained, okay? You don't sit the buttstock off of your shoulder. You put it in your shoulder. It gives you better control of the gun. I mean, like, I've been shooting a pretty decent bit, and I've shot an automatic AK-74 at one point, and it's so stupid. You can't aim that thing accurately. Like, that spray is everywhere. You know, like, people call them the TikTok battalion, and I believe that's what they are. They're like some kind of very cheap, like, regular show kind of people, you know, that you see on Saturday. Got no acting skills or anything. They're just on there, and they're just doing their crap, and this is exactly what they're doing. Just look at this. Oh my god. God bless them. Oh my lord. They really need help. Look at him, he's gonna do it again. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's awful. I hate watching videos like that because it's just so dumb. Like, what are they hitting? Look at this. Look at this spray again. Oh my gosh. Dude, he's not hitting anything. Like, if he hit anything, it'd be lucky. Look at how his gun pops around and stuff. Like, if you actually put that in your shoulder, it would be much more effective. And on the top of that, why is he shooting full auto anyways? Like, you know, like, the best way to fire a gun like that, and you know, like, you know, everyone can act like the military is like a different set of rules, but it's just common sense that firing an auto it wastes a load of ammo, and then it's not as accurate because the recoil will pop the gun up regardless how you're holding it. So it's like, why is he not aiming it properly, and why is he putting it on auto? And I'm telling you why. It's just for the show of it. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Once again, we see the Chechens doing goofy stuff in Mariupol, just trying to be internet celebrities. So now we're going to move down to where being an internet celebrity wasn't a hot idea for him, where we can see vehicles on the beach near the dockyard being hit by ATGMs from the Azov. This kind of put in question to me whether the Russians actually control the port of Mariupol, considering that this was at the very end of the dock where the beach began. But I'm going to let y'all see the video, because regardless of that situation, this is good stuff. So you can see here all the vehicles, and boom, one of them got hit. It doesn't even look like anyone's around these vehicles anymore. And they may just have been abandoned on the beach, but now we can see this one kind of cooking off. We can also see something coming out of the side of it. Like some kind of like white substance on film. It may be, it wouldn't be gas pouring out because that would be on fire. I don't know what that is. But nonetheless, a truck was taken out by an ATGM. Hopefully they got the rest of them, but we didn't see that on video. So with that, that's actually all the news that we've gotten out of Mariupol today, and it looks like the defenders of Mariupol will be able to hold on for for a decent while longer, from what I'm assuming. I will say, if I had to put a date on it, at least another week, and then we'll have to revisit that in a week and see if the situation has changed, and then say how much longer beyond that. But I don't want to give like some kind of overarching prediction right now as to how this is going to go. It could really go anyway. They could fall within the next 24 hours. They could hold till the end of the war. I'm not really sure. Hopefully they hold till the end of the war, but, you know, that's being really optimistic. Now we're going to move on down towards the area near Yalta, which y'all may remember from the Yalta conference in World War II. Really neat. That's actually the town where it happened. And here you can see a wing of Su-34s that were spotted off the coast. There's actually a very large number of them, so I'm going to put this on screen first and unmute it so that way you can hear the audio. But as you can see, a large group of aircraft flying off in the distance. I don't know what their actual target or destination is, but it was very interesting to see such a large number of Su-34s, from what the video caption was, flying in such a small area. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 aircraft, all within plain sight in one spot. Very odd. Hopefully someone can fill me in with information, or I can find information on where they went the day after. But that was a very odd sight nonetheless. We haven't ever seen any more than 2 aircraft operating at a single moment in all the videos up till that point, and now we've seen 6 of them all in the same area. We're now going to move on to a guy who I would say is kind of like Russia's version of Kenneth Copeland. You know, regardless of your opinion on Kenneth Copeland, he kind of has this very flamboyant way of going about things. You know, in like his church. And this guy seemed to have like pretty much encompassed that kind of same energy and how he's presenting himself on Russian TV. Also, there is a speech-to-text translation in this video, so hopefully y'all find that very entertaining because this guy is off his rocker. Anyways, here's the video. And also listen to how he talks. It's silly.
А у нас в России патриотический консенсус, который звучит так. До конца добивать нацистскую гадину. Вот я себе представляю людей там, кто теперь эту мразь будет пытаться брать.
Also, I like how this guy is advocating right here in this sentence. You know, he says, "Who would want to take that filth as POWs?" He's advocating that the Russians ought to just execute all the Ukrainian POWs they take. That's insane. I mean, like, it's a different thing for them, for, you know, something to happen to them after they're a POW, like they stop getting food because there's food shortages or something like that. That's kind of something out of everyone's control. It's a thing that happens. But to just straight up say kill them all regardless of the situation, that's wild. I mean, like that's a straight up war crime. I mean, like, it's really a war crime to execute prisoners of war under any circumstances, but that's nuts. That's radical. Anyways, we're gonna move on with the video.
Предаю тебя, Вовка Еленский.
You see, that's that Kenneth Copeland stuff I'm talking about right there. You know, where like Kenneth Copeland went COVID-19. That's kind of like the same thing, but in the Russian form. Which is odd to me that they have people like that over there. But anyways, here's the video.
Никакой ты не еврей. И никакой ты неверующий человек. Ты чистый, дешевый бес. Бес.
Oh, wait a minute, hang on. I just noticed. I'm sorry, everyone. Y'all can't see the text entirely due to how I have to kind of like set up my screen so people can't see my little thing here in the bottom because they'll figure out kind of like where I am specifically due to the weather. So I'm sorry about that. I'll actually read this off after each little line. I'll go back a little bit and redo this. So right here, he's saying Vovka Zelensky. I don't know if he's talking about Vladimir Zelensky. And right here, he says, I condemn you. So I'm going to go through this so that way you can see him go through his crazy annex again because it's hilarious, really. So he says, I condemn you. Then he says, Vovka Zelensky. And then he says, with an anathema.
Никакой ты не еврей.
Then he says, you're not a Jew, you're not a believer.
И никакой ты неверующий человек.
And he says, you're a pure, cheap devil.
Ты чистый, дешевый бес. Бес ты.
And he says, you're the devil. What's up with this guy? You know, this guy is crazy. This guy is really actually crazy.
И слуги твои.
And he says, and your slaves are tiny devils.
Бесы. Поэтому...
I don't think this guy understands that I think he's just so crazy he doesn't understand that he's actually the slave to Putin. You know, who is a devil. We know that for sure now. So I think he's kind of getting this backwards. Then he says you need to be chased, not negotiated with.
Гнать тебя надо, а не переговариваться с тобой. Ты русскому православному воинству.
Then he says you've shown Russian Orthodox warriors. We're fighting not only Nazis, but the devils.
Не только с нациками, мы с бесами воюем. Ваша сатанинская нацистская власть.
And now look, now he's gone into Soviet era commentator mode. Like he switched everything. Like he switched from like the weird singing thing to now he's the Nemanja guy from like World War II. So let's go back and listen to that again. And he said you're a satanic Nazi government in that statement. So let me go back and run that again.
Ваша сатанинская нацистская власть. Безбожный враг Украины.
Россия выведет все свои войска.
So now this guy here is saying Russia will withdraw all of its troops. And now, just to summarize what he says to make this a little bit of a longer, uninterrupted video, he'll sit there and say, what, in 50 years we shouldn't withdraw ever, you know, because these people are scum and such. That's what he says. This guy is nuts. Like, really, he is.
Да я не знаю.
А зачем нам выводить войска? Для нас нет задачи сохранения вашего государства.
Now he's going through his crazy annex again. listen to him. I mean, like he went from talking in a normal voice to now he's gone into like the weird stuff again. Let's take a listen.
Сатана! Поэтому ваша власть сатанинская. На что я могу сказать? Войны российской армии. Работайте, братья.
Crazy guy. Just nuts. We have people like that here in the United States. That's kind of why I said he acts a bit like Kenneth Copeland in a way. Not to get into that whole realm, but, you know, he's got a weird way of going about things. And this guy here, this guy's nuts. This guy's crazy. So we're now going to move on from that to the news outside of Russia, and we're going to move to Poland, where we started to see a little bit of fracturing in Western relations among Western countries. As we can see, Poland actually cut all diplomatic ties with Hungary. Someone actually touched on this a bit. They asked me, what do you think about the government that has been elected in Hungary? And it's kind of weird that they voted to remove Russia from the Human Rights Council when the current government actually supports the Russians in a way. And I didn't actually have anything to comment on it, but we can actually see that that is a very true statement and is being taken very seriously by other Western governments, as the Polish have seized relations with Hungary entirely. That was a very interesting little bit of news that came out today. And also, Hungary, I believe, if I am correct, is a pretty EU member states. Let me check. I think they are yes, they are a member of the European Union. I believe they're a fairly new one, though. But still, that's starting to show a little bit of fracturing here with the Hungarians as far as the Polish are concerned, because the Polish, as you may know, aren't really pro-European Union, but right now it looks like they're actually standing with the European Union to try and deliver as much aid and support to Ukraine as possible. And now they're starting to take action against other EU members as much as they can to try and quash out the pro-Russian sentiments that may exist in some of the other governments. So that was a very interesting tidbit of news today from Poland. And finally, we're going to move on to the Italian news. We'll cover the British news last because that's kind of carrying over on the Boris Johnson stuff. Kind of a good way to end the night as far as the news goes. And here we can see Italy donated 50 fire trucks. This is, of course, a picture they sent to, kind of like add to the news article, but they delivered 50 new fire trucks to Ukraine. Very neat stuff. And so we're now going to move on to our last bit of news outside of Britain, from inside of Britain today, where we can hear that the United Kingdom is sending Harpoons. I attached the link where I got the evidence for that statement. Harpoons are anti-ship missiles. We actually covered a little bit earlier how much of the Black Sea that would remove the Russians from due to the fear of their ships being hit by a harpoon. And it's not the kind of harpoons where you're whaling. These are some pretty decent punching weapons right here. So I actually have the Wikipedia article here. These are harpoons. They are United States designed, and I believe they're United States manufactured, but a whole bunch of countries buy them. As you can see, the place of origin is the United States, and the manufacturers are McDonnell Douglas. And then later on, McDonnell Douglas was bought out by Boeing, and now Boeing builds these things. There's been 7,500 of them built, and they have a range of 75 nautical miles, which is 139 kilometers. Of course, the mile to nautical miles translation wasn't exactly accurate, but you could get a very good picture of how much of the Black Sea is going to be cut off to the Russians now, considering that they'll probably not want to risk the destruction of their fleets, considering that ships are incredibly expensive and take a while to build. So a very good system to send to Ukraine. It appears that it is operated mostly off of ships and aircraft, so I don't know exactly what kind of anti-ship missile version of the Harpoon they're sending. As you can see here, fixed-wing aircraft is the AGM-84. Surface ships, it being fired off a ship, is the RGM-84, and then off of submarines is the UGM-84. I don't know if they've created a version that can be fired from a vehicle, but I have the feeling if these are being sent to Ukraine, they're probably going to be attached to an aircraft, and it'll be the AGM-84 version. So with that, we've actually reached the end of tonight's news, and I hope you all have enjoyed. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also, if you would like to hang around for the questions, maybe ask one yourself, we are going to get to a couple of questions from the live chat, and we're going to answer all the super chats we've gotten. And so before we start, Matthew, how many super chats do we have?
So we are currently sitting at just about 20.
All right, so I'm actually going to put a cutoff on those tonight. So if you do want a super chat, I thank you very much, but I would highly recommend that you hold it till the next stream if you want to support the channel, or maybe save your money and donate to the fundraiser we'll be running tomorrow night. We haven't, due to time constraints, because I haven't even had time to really look. We haven't picked out a fundraiser organization yet, but we will, of course, have one up before tomorrow. So, once again, I hope y'all do come and do support the cause as much as possible. And so, with that, that is the cutoff for tonight. So if you do donate and you do have a question after this point, unfortunately, we won't be able to answer it due to the amount of time we have. But with that, let's get on to the questions. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so first up, we have a $20 donation from Randy Smith. Thank you very much, Randy, for your donation. Next up, we have a comment from Eduardo Gonzalez, who puts in a $20 donation. He says, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate this show. 45 days ago, Ukraine was covered and discussed by mainstream media wall to wall. Now, viewers are lucky to get just 5 minutes of superficial coverage.
I do agree. The main reason, though, and this has been noticed on my channel as well, is that they follow trending topics. As the war has gone on, less and less people pay attention. People in general have an incredibly short attention span. So once this thing reached about 20 something days in, like around 25, people who really care about it start to drop off because they're like, it's gone on too long. I really don't care. They move on. And we've noticed that here as well because our viewership has been going down lower and lower as the war goes on. But I have a commitment to keep on reporting this war until it's over, and I'm going to make sure that we do that in any form. So the streams will continue here, and so I'm glad that you do enjoy that we continue to cover this war, because regardless whether it's trending or not, I don't really care. I kind of have a vested interest in reporting this news, and so I'm going to make sure to keep reporting it. So I thank you once again for supporting us. It does mean a lot, and we'll make sure to put it towards good use in running this channel. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Tony Go, who says, Hello, Enforcer. This donation is in honor of two of my Ukrainian friends. Tanya found out her husband's cousin was killed in action in Donbass, and this morning, Tamara was informed her husband was killed in action in Mariupol.
Oh, yikes. I hate to hear that. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully, their bodies will be able to be recovered and given a proper burial. I'm sure that they probably were. I don't really know the specific details. Probably you do. But if they were notified that they've been killed, hopefully their bodies were recovered as well. And I'm terribly sorry to hear that. I hope y'all get through that well. And I hope that there's some kind of solace y'all can find in this news that Ukraine is doing incredibly well. And so they didn't die in vain in a way. And so I thank you very much for the support. And I hate to hear that once again. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Dark Myth, who puts in a donation of $20. They say, Hi, please note you need to get an FAA Part 107 license to show drone footage on YouTube or any non recreational purpose. I got mine about 2 months ago and it requires some studying, but it's not horrible. And Dark Myth, I will say that we do have that covered actually. We've taken that into consideration, and that's a very good observation to let us know. So thank you very much for your comment. And next up, we have two donations without comments. We have a $20 donation from Zena Godu and an $18 donation from David Williams. Thank you both very much for the donations. We appreciate it very much. And next up, we have a comment from Speed Break, who puts in an $18 donation. He says, Golly, coffee fund.
Well, golly, thank you so much for it. I'm glad that you're still here supporting the channel. I gotta say, I mean, like, I gotta thank some of my return supporters like Zeta Lane and Speed Break, and I just want everyone to give them a huge round of applause, because people like them make sure that this channel keeps on running. And also some of the really big ticket people who sometimes put in donations, but when they do, they are massive, like patents and trademarks. Michael, George, I want to thank them all, because they've helped out this channel a great deal as well with their support, and it helps us to keep on going. And also, because of that, I've been able to run a tab right now and get people to get things for me, so that way we can keep on looking towards the future and trying to make this channel the best it can be and report the best news we can to y'all. And so I thank y'all so much. It means a lot to me. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night goes to Mech Tactical, who puts in a $12 donation. He says, As always, I love the streams. Regarding the M4 we saw, it isn't unreasonable to assume that it isn't an AR rechambered in 7.62, which would be the best of both worlds.
Yeah, now that's something I'm not willing to dismiss at all, because that's something that a lot of people do. It's very often to have guns rechambered into a more available round. As we saw, the United States actually, I believe, tried to convert, I believe, some Lee Enfield Mark IVs in World War II. Or they, I'm not really sure what direction it was. I know that one of my friends has one, but it was a Lee Enfield that was modified to shoot 30-06, and there was actually a pretty decent amount of them. I think they were made by Savage Arms. But yeah, that is a very normal thing, and I wouldn't discredit that at all. That may be a possibility, or that may actually be the case with those particular weapons. So I thank you very much for the support and bringing that up, because I actually hadn't thought about that, but that is a perfect explanation as to why there is an M4 platform there, and it may explain how they're delivering ammo to it and keeping their supply lines as simplified as possible. So I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Joseph Neves, who says, just wanted to show some support and let you know that I appreciate you guys. Also, I hate Putin and Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini, and I can't agree. I do not like Putin as well. Hate the guy. Hope that something. I hope that he doesn't really last long after this war is over. So I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the channel. It means a lot to me, and I hope that we can continue to go on with these streams and make sure that everyone can get the news that they need to hear every single day. So thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Steve Brown, who says, pray for the liberation of Mariupol and the cutoff to Crimea and the capture of the Russian Southern Army.
I do agree. And something good I've heard is that the Ukrainians appear to be making it really public, which makes it sound like they're very confident that they can maybe relaunch an offensive towards Mariupol and actually relieve the city's defenders, how many there are left. So hopefully that's the case. I would really love to see such a great story unfold of the Russians getting it handed to them so bad that their TikTok superstars get overrun and Mariupol is liberated. As far as the cutting off Crimea, I think that's going to entirely revolve around Kherson right now. We still haven't gotten any news that the Ukrainians have managed to push the Russians out of Kherson, which makes it sound like they're well defended around that area, and that the Ukrainians aren't making too much progress there, because this map hasn't changed. This map hasn't moved right here for at least a week. But hopefully that does change soon, and they're able to bust through Kherson and start making their way towards Crimea and cut the Russians off. So I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a super chat from longtime channel supporter Tito McLovin. He says, Russian train engineers are the new Schweinfurt ball bearing factories. This workforce must be the targets of opportunity deep in Russia. Save lives and shorten the war. SBU get busy now, and Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini, and I can agree. Those guys, I bet, are probably scared to death because the Russian logistical system relies so heavily on them that you know that the Ukrainians are trying to target them somehow. So, hopefully the Ukrainians can, it's an unfortunate thing to think about, but hopefully the Ukrainians can have some kind of success in that regard, and maybe start slowing down Russian logistics even further, because if they can, that will only help them out even more. So I thank you very much for the support and weighing in on that. That is actually a very good assessment of the situation. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have DC90, a longtime channel supporter, coming in hot with a donation of $120. He says, here's to continuing the channel fund. Keep it up. The wife and I really enjoy your coverage every night. Have a good one, fellows.
Good Lord. Thank you so much, DC90, for the huge support. That means a lot to me, and I'm glad. And I got to thank you. It keeps the channel running, and I'm always wondering about the future of the channel. I mean, like, at this point, I know that's going to go on for a good bit, but that kind of support that always comes through, and from great people like you who are always here supporting the channel, it lets me really think really far out and think about all the cool and amazing and informational things that we can do here at this channel. And I thank you so much, and I'm glad that you and your wife are enjoying it. And also, if both of y'all are watching right now, I want to thank both of y'all so much for enjoying the stream. It means a lot to me, and your support is a huge deal to me and everyone here at the channel. And so I thank you so much. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from longtime channel supporter TJ Johnson. He says, thank you for getting the map up and working again. It's one of the best I've seen. Have a coffee and creamer on me.
Oh man, you're getting lavish there. A creamer? I just drink the coffee black. But I thank you very much for the support. It means a lot to me, and I am glad that people do enjoy the stream. Of course, it makes me so happy because I started this stream and no one watched it. Like the first time I did this, like no views, and I was fine with that. I didn't really care. The channel had it just reached 100 subscribers. I thought that was huge, and I didn't really care if people were watching it or not. I just wanted to do it for fun, and so people flooded in that one night, and it became huge. And I didn't know that so many people one day would enjoy my content so much to keep on coming back every night and listen to it. And I just gotta say, I thank y'all so much. It means a lot to me. It really does. And I never thought that I'd see the day where I was sitting here thinking forwards into the future and actually having big plans. And I never thought I'd make it to that. And I've got to thank y'all so much. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Gina Gaynor, who says, "Dear Enforcer, this being said, how about an Enforcer shot glass in the merch for the days we feel like keeping count of that being said? Thank you to you and Matt and the crew for all you do."
Oh, thank you so much for the support. And I've been talking about that. I've been talking about that in the background. I was like, it could be a limited edition thing, kind of like a joke thing. And I've been talking about that so much, and I'm wanting to do it. We just don't really know how we're going to do it right now. So it will probably come out in the future. That's something we're going to add to the list of things we're wanting to do and trying to do right now. But I thank you so much for the support. And yes, I have thought about that, and I do want to do that. So I thank you so much again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Mark Fisher, who puts in a $10 donation, and he says, "How effective do you think the Harpoon missiles from the UK will be in the fight?"
Harpoon missiles will be effective. The question is how much, and that depends on the defensive capabilities of the ships they're firing these missiles at. A lot of ships in the modern world have some kind of CIWS system on board, even the Russian ones, and so they have the ability to shoot down a decent amount of these missiles before one can hit. That's why they're usually, as far as I know, fired in a kind of decent amount. Modern ships were made to not be hit. They have paper-thin armor, but they have incredibly good defensive capabilities. So I'm not really sure how effective they'll be, and once again, that's kind of my understanding of how it works. I may be wrong. Maybe the first Harpoon missile that's fired will hit a ship. I don't really know, but that's the knowledge I know about naval warfare, and so that's why I think maybe the stance, and it kind of just depends on a couple of factors, but I believe for the most part they'll just be an effective deterrent because the chance of losing a ship would be a very big deal to the Russian Navy. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that answers the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a donation from Tim Q, who puts in a $10 donation. He says, "Slava Ukraine."
Slava Ukraini. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next one is from Eric Bouchot, who says, "Following you from day one, but the first time live since I've got a quiet night shift at work. Greetings from Belgium."
Well, I thank you so much for being here since day one. You're a very rare kind of breed. There was almost no one here on day one. I bet you're probably one of the guys who watched me on Train Sim World when I said, "Oh my god, there's a war going on. It just started. Let me switch over." And I switched over. And actually on that first stream, I played War Thunder in the first few minutes of it. That was really weird when I look back at it. I was like, why was I playing War Thunder? But nonetheless, I thank you so much for being here so long, and I'm glad that you were able to catch it for the first time live. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $18 donation from Martin Roberts, who says, "Enforcer, how many Azov fighters are left? Keep fighting like warriors." And Slava Ukraine from Australia.
Slava Ukraini, and firstly, we don't really have an idea. I don't really know how many Azov defenders got stuck inside the city in the first place, and so I don't really know how many they started off with to even get a number of how many are left. We also don't know that they're publishing like any kind of casualty statistics, and I don't really believe that would be in their advantage because that would start giving the Russians an idea of their actual numbers. So as of right now, we don't really know, sadly, and I can't really give a specific answer on that. So I hate to say that, but they are fighting like some wild dogs in there. I mean, like they are going off, and so however many there are, I really think is like non sequitur because they're just doing so well that even if it's a small amount, they are invaluable to the defense of that city. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that it does answer the question in a way as far as I can answer it. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and next up, we have a comment from Max, who puts in a $5 donation. He says, I just wanted to say thanks.
And I just want to say thanks to you for finding the channel good enough that you will support it. It is an honor to know that a lot of people do like the channel and do support it. And so I thank you so much once again. It's really something to me. I mean, like, you know, I say that a lot, and I know that everyone hears it a lot, and of course, I hate giving the same spill. I'm trying to think of how to get this out in words. I hate giving the same spill about how much it means to me sometimes, because I just feel like once you say something a lot, it doesn't come off as sincere anymore. But if y'all knew my feelings every single time someone sent in a donation, and knowing that people like my channel enough to support it, you would know that I am 100% sincere. And so I thank you so much. I thank all of y'all so much, like DC90 for his massive support tonight, and Zeta Lane and Speed Break and everyone. I thank y'all all so much. It does mean a lot to me. And so with that, I thank you once again. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a super chat from Paul Heil, who puts in a $20 donation. He says, if you receive a tin of caviar anonymously, dump it, as you're pissing off the Russian bots like no other. LOL. You're making a difference with facts. Bless your heart.
Well, I thank you very much. And speaking of dumping out caviar, it looks like for the first time, which was really neat. I mean, like, honestly, it was kind of interesting in a way. We got a death threat. And I mean, like, you know, that's not really anything to get excited about in a way, but it tells me that I'm pissing off bots so bad that they're actually going to send in death threats, which I thought was, you know, it doesn't really make me scared. I've got guns. You know, I don't really care if they try and come here. It's like, come at me. And we'll see. You know, one of us will be on the ground, but it won't be me. But I do thank you so much. We are pissing them off so bad, and I love it. And there's nothing they can do about it, rather than like poison me with Novichok. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a super chat from Cesar Lopez, who puts in a $10 donation and says, been here since day one of the war. Seen very stream, decided to donate with my primary account now. I appreciate the streams and sent a few peeps your way. Very grateful for the commitment and updates.
And I thank you so much, man. Like, once again, you're an incredibly rare group, considering that you've been here since day one. I don't know if you were on the stream where I literally covered it within, like, the first hour. Like, I literally started a stream 1 hour into the war. And so I've been covering this thing since literally the first few minutes, really. And it's something to think about the journey we've gone through, listening to the news and as a channel, and all the jokes that have popped up, and the That Being Saids, and the Leaf Springs, and the Sockeye Salmons, and all those things, and going through this trip, and it's just been something. And I gotta say, I thank every single one of y'all for being along for the ride. It means a lot to me, and I hope that y'all continue to stay around. I mean, like, I'm so glad to know that a lot of people do like the channel, and I hope y'all do enjoy what there is to come in the future. And so I thank y'all all so much. It does mean a lot to me. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from a longtime channel supporter. He's coming back again with us. It's George, New York's premier contractor, who says, how long should this war last? I don't think anybody is ready for a long war. However, we have many wars still going on around the world.
Well,
Excuse me.
actually, I've been asking the Ukrainians if they can speed this up a little, because really honestly, right now they're not even trying, and they're beating the Russians terribly. So if they just put in a little bit, I'm just kidding, by the way, when I say this, but if they just put in a little bit of effort, they could just push them out. I mean, like, really. But yeah, I mean, like, hopefully this doesn't last much longer. I think the Russians are going to start running out of fumes here, and so they're going to start looking at a peace agreement seriously. I've been saying that for a while now, but I just don't know how much longer they'll go on. We haven't seen them commit any more forces to the war, and it's been about a month and a half now, which tells me they have no ability to commit more forces, because if they did, they would have just rolled them in at this point. They just don't have the ability to. So I don't know how much longer it's going to last, but hopefully not much longer than now. So I thank you very much for the support, and I'm so glad that once again you're here supporting the channel again. And I hope I answered the question fairly well, and I thank you once again. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from longtime channel supporter BSG Wolf. He says, "Don't forget the nitric acid Coke."
Oh yeah, yeah. I actually did drink it. It was a little bitter, honestly. I wasn't a big fan. So I kind of dumped that habit immediately. Figured out that nitric acid doesn't really go well in drinks. Thank you once again for bringing that one up. That was a really small one, but that means you've been here and you've been paying attention, man. And I thank you. And so with that, we're gonna move on to the next question.
And the next one is from Jason Bourne, who puts in a $10 donation. He says, "Sorry, I wasn't able to watch your streams for about a week. Are you guys aware of the Russian Freedom Legion?"
We are aware of the Russian Freedom Legion. It's just that we haven't gotten a lot of like video news, and on top of that, it's such a small group that I'm like, yeah, it's like, should I cover them? Should I not? Because there's only so many slots in the news that I can cover before this thing goes on too long, and I'm like, I did show the Russian prisoners that were signing into the Ukrainian military to get trained and then sent back to the front. And those may be those guys. I just haven't really been following that story all too well. But I do thank you for the support, and I have heard of them. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Tito McLovin, who says, "Please extend the blue NATO border through Norway, Denmark, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania to the Black Sea, and the northern Turkish border."
I was wanting to do that, but when you look at it, Georgia isn't really a member nation of Russia or a Russian aligned country. They don't really like the Russians all too much. That's why there's these two little fake countries in here. Another thing is that Romania borders Ukraine, and so it's like, it's not really a front line that they share with like a Russian aligned country or Russia itself. So I didn't want to extend the lines too much because, well, really up here, yeah, this is one spot I will do it in right now because Norway actually does border Russia in this one small spot. And so we'll add this. I don't really feel like it'd be important in a war, but nonetheless, it is important to put this down as native front line. So give me just a second, y'all. I'm going to draw up a pretty little line right through this nature reserve. And then we'll go down here. We'll do that. NATO. And then we'll click save, we'll go through, and we'll edit the style and the thickness of the line to make sure that we know that's NATO. All right, so we got that one. Finland, of course, is still neutral right now and hasn't accepted itself into NATO. Well, NATO hasn't accepted it in yet, so we'll just have to wait and see on that frontline development. So I hope that does kind of like address that a little bit because I forgot about that small segment up there. So with that, thank you for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $10 donation from Cesar Lopez. And unfortunately, I will pass that message on to the enforcer, but we will have to move on so that way we have time to get to our other questions as well. But thank you again for your donation, and we do very much appreciate it. Next up, we have a $5 donation from S. Moore, who says, "Sylvia, the silver-sided blue-eyed sockeye salmon asks, what do you know about the Mozart group in country?"
The Mozart or the Mozart?
Mozart.
I haven't heard about them. So unfortunately, Sylvia the Sockeye Salmon will not get an answer to that one tonight, sadly, because I just haven't heard about it. I hate to say that, because I do try and keep up with all the news, but I think that one has slipped by us here. So if you could maybe send us a little bit of information on the Discord about that story, I would love to hear it, and maybe be able to have time to read it, although that will not happen tomorrow probably at all. We have to get up early in the morning to set off to where we need to go to film, and then we're going to be gone all day pretty much, and then come back just in time for me to sit down and start putting this thing together about 3 hours before the stream goes live. So I thank you very much for the support, and sadly, I hate to say it, man, because I try and answer that sockeye salmon's question every night, but tonight I don't think I have an answer to that one, so I'm sorry, but I do thank you for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Nazumu Yumi, who says, "Do you see the report about the Russian soldier who filmed himself on Telegram assaulting a toddler?" And the question, or the answer to that question, would be yes.
Yeah, and we got that sicko's name too. Hopefully Matthew made a note of that guy's name, so that way we can put that up somewhere on our Discord, so that way we can know, or we can let everyone know in our Discord who that sick criminal is. And I actually saw some people in the comments saying that he had been arrested, and you know, this is really a tough thing to say because I don't really know like if this would be a war crime or anything, but that guy deserves to have the expedited execution service, the Amazon Prime execution, if anyone would. So thank you very much for the question, and that's the answer to it, and the support as well. So we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from JuneBug72, who is a longtime channel supporter, who says, "May the people of Ukraine find justice and peace. May it be so. Slava Ukraine."
Slava Ukraini, and I do agree. Hopefully, they can find some justice and peace at the end of this war, and hopefully, the Western world as a whole helps them to rebuild their country in a way that looks so good that it may as well be a full-on, full-fledged Western country as far as its infrastructure and its buildings. So I thank you very much for the support, and I can entirely agree with that statement. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Man of Culture, who says, "The dull thud you hear before an ATGM launches is a small mechanical gyroscope that is engaged so the guidance of the missile is accurate."
Thank you so much for answering that. I did ask that way early on in the stream, and I was seriously wondering what that was. And I thank you for answering that, because I didn't think that that would be the guidance, like the gyroscope that's probably helping guide this missile activate. I didn't think it would be that. So I thank you very much for answering that. And yeah, I mean, like, I'm just really grateful for that. Thank you. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. And we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a super chat from Stray Cat 241, who says, "Is there a chance of a three-front war happening to Russia with the Finns wanting to join NATO and the Japanese about the islands?"
I don't think, once again, this is my opinion, it may be wrong, but I don't think the Japanese are actually going to pursue the islands and go to war with Russia. That's just me, though. That may be wrong, but that's my opinion right now. So we'll just wait and see. And once again, take my opinion with a grain of salt on that. As far as Finland, though, the question is, will Finland allow them in? Russia could threaten to nuke the Western world if we allow Finland in, and then we would probably step back because no one's wanting to be the guy who gets to blame for destroying the entire world. So we'd have to see, and I don't think new front lines would open up, because look how much trouble Russia's having with just one. Imagine if they had three at the same time. The nuclear weapons would be rolling out, and they would be rolling out seriously. So I thank you very much for the support. That's kind of my assessment of the situation, but take it with a grain of salt, because that's just my opinion, and it's based off of the knowledge I know, but it could be wrong. And so with that, I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next one goes to Diffuse56, a longtime channel supporter, who says, "I'm grateful to Team Enforcer for the in-depth and, above all, honest reporting. Enjoy your Mondays off, and I'm looking forward to the forthcoming video."
I thank you so much, and I hope that you will enjoy this video. We're going to put our blood, sweat, and a lot of our tears, because actually this is a very emotionally draining process for everyone here. I'm just playing about that. We don't cry on this channel. We just work. But I hope that you will enjoy this video. So I thank you so much once again for your support, and I hope that you love it. I hope that a lot of people do. And so with that, thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Knuckles. He puts in a $5 donation and says, "Not much, but having some personal issues. Keep up the work, and I love watching every night."
It ain't much, but it's honest work. I gotta thank you so much for the support. You're always here supporting us, and I hope those little issues sort themselves out. So I thank you so much once again for the support, Knuckles, and we're gonna move on to the next question.
And the next one is from VMan29397, who says, "Hey, Enforcer, did you see Pinky Floyd music video with the Ukrainian singer Andre, I can't pronounce that, of Boombox? It's pretty powerful."
Sadly, I haven't. Like, I'm telling you, like, you can ask Matthew. Like, Matthew, back me up here. Like, I work all day. Like, literally from when I wake up to when I go to bed. It's college and, like, the channel. And I'm like, like, Matthew works a very good deal on this channel as well. But I'm literally working sun up to sun down, like, on college and the YouTube channel. And Matthew can back me up there, can't you?
True story.
Yeah, and so people have been telling me to watch that, but I've literally never even got the time to sit down and do that. Like, I got the time today to play like 30 minutes of War Thunder, and that was it. And like, you know, that's just kind of me like taking a break. Like, you know, you take a break at work, you go like for lunch or something. That was kind of like my version of a lunch break, was just playing War Thunder for 30 minutes. So, I thank you very much for the support, but unfortunately, I haven't heard the music video. I'm going to try to, though, eventually, and give my commentary on it, but I do thank you for the support. And with that, how many super chats do we have left?
So let's see here. We have Just about 3 comments left and a few donations without comments.
All right. And with that, let's get on to the next question.
So I'm going to go ahead and knock out a few of these donations here. We have a $5 donation from Frank Schifrin. We have a $3 and a $2 donation from David Rodland. We have a $2 donation from Michael Fernandez. And that is the end of the donations. So thank you very much to all of you. Some of you are longtime channel supporters, and we appreciate you being around for quite a long time. And as always, we appreciate the support very, very much. Next up, we have a super chat from Digital Bladeka, who says, "You're awesome, Enforcer and Matt. Cheers for covering it daily."
And I thank you so much for the support. And I'm glad that you think we are awesome. Once again, I kind of like think I'm still an average person. I am really. I mean, like, there's nothing. It's not like I'm saying I think I'm an average person, but I'm really extraordinary. I'm really just an average person. But I thank you so much for giving me such high praise for the work and effort that I'm putting into it. And I thank you so much for recognizing the work and effort that Matthew's putting into it and a couple of the people behind the scenes. I thank you so much. It does mean a lot to us. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $2 donation from Nazumu Yumi, who says they have photos of his ID and stuff now. And I think they're referring to the creep that messed with the toddler.
Well, I'm glad that they do. I think we've heard that he was arrested, and I hope that his justice is very swift, and hopefully, you know, that's kind of crossing the bound. I was gonna say very cruel, but you know, really, honestly, it just ought to be swift. I don't really know about the cruelty part, but someone doing something that sick. I mean, like even here in the United States, I'm like there really should be an exception to child molesters as far as their punishment being cruel and unusual. I'm like, you know, sometimes there ought to be exceptions to that amendment, and that's one of them. Of course, in Ukraine, I don't know if they have that kind of amendment in their constitution or any of their laws, but one can only hope that that sicko will actually meet justice very soon. So I thank you very much for sharing that info with us, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $2 donation from Orlos the Druid, and he says, "My name is Druid. Druid."
Well, I thank you very much for sharing that with us, Druid. We were very appreciative. I'm just playing with you. I thank you very much for the support, Druid. I do know how to say that. It is Druid. So I thank you very much once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on. Do we have any more super chats, Matthew?
Yeah, we have one more that just came in after the cutoff, but of course, we are going to give recognition. It's from Cole Swan. He puts in an $11 donation.
And I thank you so much for the donation. It does help out this channel a lot, and I'm glad that you are willing to support it. And with that, we're going to move on to 3 questions from the live chat, and then we're going to wrap up this stream for the night.
Okay, so first up from the live chat, Vicious Tuna always sends in really good questions. So he's the first question I'm going to read off from the live chat. So he says, "Enforcer, do you think Odessa will hold out, or are they doomed to a similar fate as Mariupol? Thank you, and Slava Ukraine."
With the provision, also, I thank you so much for bringing up great questions, because you have been a guy who I've heard time after time again bringing up these amazing questions. They are very, very good questions, and I love them. So I thank you so much for bringing them up. They're great. But to answer it, as far as Odessa is going right now, I think the Russians were counting on the Battle of Mykolaiv to be won for them to then cross the bridge over the Ba. And then reach the other side and start pushing towards Odessa there. And then they were going to launch a naval invasion, so that way it could be soon backed up by a land connection and some kind of land supply line. So I don't think Odessa is under the threat of naval invasion right now. But even if they were, now that the United Kingdom is giving them Harpoon anti-ship missiles, regardless of how they're going to be launched, because we looked into that earlier, they are going to make sure that the Russians will not be able to launch a naval invasion on Odessa easily. And if they do, I think Odessa is going to be in a different situation than Mariupol was, because Mariupol was actually very close to the Russian front line already. Odessa, however, is not. So there wouldn't be any soon-to-be ground support coming to relieve that naval invasion force, and they would kind of be stuck there on their own, probably without any sort of port infrastructure to keep a supply line running. So I don't really think it's a possibility, but I do thank you for the question, man. That was a great question. So I hope that did answer it a pretty good way, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a live chat from Professor Thunder, who says, "Enforcer, is there any evidence that the U.S. has military personnel in Ukraine. It is rumored the U.S. is removing Russian weapons via special forces through Poland to examine and reverse engineer the tech.
So wait a minute, did he say that they're going into like Belarus and stealing the Russian weapons and then bringing them back?
He says that the U.S. is removing Russian weapons through Poland. So I guess, taking them across the border
Oh,
to Poland.
okay. Yes, we do have a little bit of like background information. Nothing concrete though, but we have heard that some kind of jamming vehicle was sent across the border into Poland, and the U.S. got their hands on it. They're doing some testing on it, and we've also heard about that drone, the Orlan, I believe it's called, or the Orion drone that was shot down somewhere in Ukraine. That apparently that also is being collected. The parts of it are being collected by the Ukrainians and may be sent to the United States for study. So we do know that they are getting some kind of equipment. I'm not really sure if the U.S. Special Forces are like entering the country and then managing that. I think the Ukrainians are actually just managing the shipment of it all the way to Poland, and then we take over from there. So I hope that does answer the question in a way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a comment from Praise Adonai, who says, there's been talk today that Ukraine will not take back the eastern coast. What does the enforcer say?
That's something that I can honestly say is a truthful assessment, because for them to win the war, they don't necessarily have to retake the land. I've kind of been saying that since the beginning, and people are like, oh, like I've heard, not everyone, but some people, and it's like it's something that doesn't make any sense to me, okay? Because they're like, they obviously have to push them out because that's the only way they can win, but they don't, all right? Because if you look at World War One, at the end of World War One, the Germans were still in France, and they lost. Okay, I mean, like that's a great historical example right there. And so to the people who, like, it's not you. I know it's not you who asked the question, but to the people who act like they have to be pushed out for them to win, that's just not the case. Like, the Ukrainians can hold them here for 2 months, and if the Russian economy keeps on collapsing and it never recovers, and the Ukrainian army keeps on inflicting deadly losses onto the Russians, they will win. They don't have to push them out per se. So, like, to answer that question, do I think they're going to retake the eastern coast? They may not. Like, that's something I'm actually looking at, and I'm like, well, they may not, because we know that in the south, the Rasputitsa isn't as strong and as, like, ferocious as it was in the northern front. And so the Russian armor has a much easier time actually moving around and having some kind of freedoms. So that does give the Russians a little bit of an advantage down there, and starts playing into their doctrine. Meanwhile, we know that the Ukrainian defense is incredibly strong because they haven't really made any ground down here for the longest time. So, and considering that the Ukrainians, not to break up my trains of thought here, but considering that the Ukrainians are saying that they may start launching a counteroffensive towards Mariupol, that may tell us that they will be able to manage to regain part of the control of their eastern coastline. Of course, I think the two major things... Well, no, wait a minute. No, I'm not going into that. That's going to give away what I think the Ukrainians will do. And I don't do that on this channel, Sally. So I hope that does answer the question about what I think. I mean, I can see them holding it, but I also, at the same time, I can see the Ukrainians considering that the counteroffensive at Mykolaiv did surprisingly good, and that they've been holding them across the entirety of the whole entire south and eastern front lines right now. It's a logical assumption to say that the Ukrainians may have the ability to actually push the Russians back and manage to reclaim some of the coastline down here. So I hope that does answer the question a fairly good deal. And with that, that was the last question of the stream. And I thank you so much for asking that question, because it is a good question. And I just, I kind of went on the rant about the people who think that you have to retake the land, because it's just not true. I mean, like, people, like, my thing is that a lot of people, like, base their idea, and it's not you, I'm just saying in general, like, a lot of people base their ideas, including the mainstream news, and I don't like that, and they base it on these, like, misconceptions and stuff. And the thing is that you don't have a lot of misconceptions when you look at history. You can see that there's always some kind of exception, or there's something that is the case. And so, like, when I think about that, and analysts will sit there and say, oh, the Russians will get their act together, and then they'll push through into Kyiv and win. I'm like, that's not the case, because historically that a recovery or a regrouping has never happened. And then people gave me backlash back then. Not a lot of people, though, but it was some people. And they gave me backlash. They're like, no, man, you don't understand. And, like, people are telling me, Like, this was one thing that I didn't like at all. People were like, you have no military experience, which I don't. And they're like, go watch Task and Purpose. And Task and Purpose, which, I mean, like, it's a fine channel, and he looks like a nice guy, and he, of course, you know, he knows what he's talking about, a pretty good deal. But he said back then, the Russians are building FOBs, and they're building pipelines down that way, and their logistics are only days away from being fixed. And once they fix them, they're just going to roll straight through Kyiv and win. And historically, there was no precedent to show that such a recovery could happen in such a short amount of time of such a terrible logistical situation where you could turn it around and win. There's never been an example like that, and I didn't like that people back then, like a few, not a lot, because that's why y'all are around, you know, because y'all take a decent amount of credit in what I say. But I didn't like that people just put no precedent into this thing, and they're like, you know, it's just going to happen this way, and there's like no backing or precedent, you know, because in law, I'm rambling right now. I'm sorry about that. But in law, there's always some kind of precedent. Like, you always have some kind of case law or something like that you pull on to say it happened like this before, and so it should happen like this in this exact instance now. And no one really works off of that. So that's why I kind of go into rants on that, because I just wish that people would use history, because, you know, like Otto von Bismarck said, the best thing you can learn from history is that no one learns from history. And almost no one cracks open a history book and says, okay, this situation is a lot like the Winter War, and in the Winter War, this happened, so we can assume that this is going to happen now in almost an identical situation. So, once again, it was a great question. Sorry for going on the rant there about, like, what my opinions are on how people should use history and interpreting a modern war and what will happen in it. But I thank you so much for the questions, and with that, it is time to end the stream. I hope y'all have all enjoyed. I thank y'all all so much again for showing up. And tomorrow, we're going to set out and start filming our video and hopefully have it up within a week or maybe a little bit longer, depending on the production schedule. So I thank y'all all so much once again, and I hope y'all have a great night. Take care, and I'll see y'all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the fundraiser stream.